Salam everyone, let's talk about Surah 9 verse 37, mainly because since posting my video about when Ramadan is and how we are to follow a lunisolar calendar and apply intercalation, some people have responded with Surah 9 verse 37 saying that this verse talks about intercalation and how God forbids it. So let's talk about this verse. First of all, I often see people quoting this verse only part of the verse. They quote the very first phrase where God says the Nasee is an increase in disbelief. And according to them, the Nasee is the intercalation. So let's take the verse in its context so that we can have a clearer understanding as to what God is talking about. Let's take it from the top, from verse 36. In 36, God says that there are 12 months. And 4 of these months are restricted. This means these restricted months is that there is no fighting. And God says in 36, 4 restricted months, do not wrong yourselves within these months. With that in mind, let's carry on to the next verse, verse 37, where God says, the Nasee is an increase in disbelief. Let's pretend that we don't know what the Nasee is, because the verse in of itself is going to explain exactly what it is. God says that the Nasee is an increase in disbelief. This means that it was only the disbelievers that were actually doing it. It was increasing their disbelief. Then God tells us what the Nasee is. They make it lawful 1 year and unlawful another year. So they were playing around with the restricted months. They were making it lawful 1 year and unlawful another year. Then God further tells us, لِيُوَاطِئُوا عِدَّةَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ فَيُحِلُّونَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ, so that they may step over the counts that God has made forbidden, and therefore, or thus, they would make lawful what is unlawful. So what they were doing is that God assigned 4 restricted months. They were stepping over this count. They were stepping over the count of the restricted months. This means that 1 year it was three months rather than 4, or 2 months rather than 4. They were playing around with those restricted months, and therefore they would make an unlawful month a lawful month. Lawful in the sense of fighting. So it depends on whatever they wanted to do. They wanted to fight that month, they would make it lawful rather than unlawful. So the result of the Nasee that is mentioned in this verse is that the disbelievers would allow or would make an unlawful month as lawful. That is all that this verse is talking about. It has nothing to do with the intercalation that we're talking about. The intercalation that we're talking about is a default adjustment factor that is used in a lunisolar calendar, just like all the other calendars. Every calendar needs to have an adjustment factor. The lunisolar calendar has intercalation. And so the intercalation that we're talking about has absolutely nothing to do with playing around with the restricted months, adding or removing restricted months. In fact, if we are using the intercalation that we are talking about, the restricted months stay within their place. They're not being moved around, nor are they being added or removed like the Nasee concept. So keep in mind, 937 has absolutely nothing to do with the intercalation that we're talking about. It is a time in which the disbelievers were adding and removing the restricted months, playing around with them, switching them around, having 3 restricted months rather than 4. They were doing these things. The intercalation that we're talking about has absolutely nothing to do with playing around with the months, nor does it affect the restricted months that we're talking about. I hope this is clear enough. Assalamu alaikum.